Thank you, Senator Young. I'll take my first round of questioning now. So if you believe that we are in and entering an era of great power competition, it is also an era in which the future of the world is going to depend on the outcome of a contest between American-style democracy and Russian and Chinese-modeled autocracy. And so the world is going to be watching when it comes to the way in which we talk about democracy and human rights and whether we're actually willing to back up that talk with action. And so I appreciate, Ms. Resnick, your opening remarks with respect to Egypt. But this is a country that is receiving significant U.S. aid, $1.3 billion a year, and in the midst of a dizzying crackdown on political dissent. Mohammed Sultan was a U.S. Citizen who was locked up in an Egyptian jail for years. They would throw sick prisoners into his cell, dying sick prisoners, let them die there, and let the corpse sit and rot inside his solitary confinement cell as a means to try to break him. That's the kind of behavior that we empower when we continue to send $1.3 billion to that regime. Not to say that there aren't legitimate reasons why we should align ourselves from a security perspective with Egypt, but isn't there a risk at some point that if there's no consequence for a country like Egypt to continuing this crackdown on political dissent and speech, that it compromises our ability to lead the world when it comes to the advancement of democracy and human rights? I heard what you said in your opening remarks, but what do you have to say about the worry that ultimately our talk on human rights doesn't match up to our actions?
Thank you for this very important question, Senator. We share your concerns about Egypt, about civil society crackdown, about restrictions on expression, on the treatment of American citizens, on the risk of civilian harm during military operations, on recent allegations about what happened in the Sinai. We have raised these issues at the highest level, and we continue to do so. We want them to understand, we want Egyptian officials to understand that this is a priority for the United States. The president himself has underscored the importance of a constructive dialogue on human rights with the government of Egypt, and we will continue to pursue this, even as we pursue shared security goals on maritime security, on border security, on counterterrorism. We understand that Egypt remains an important security partner, as evidenced by their leadership in achieving the ceasefire in Gaza. Their leadership and their partnership remains critical today, but we will continue to raise human rights at the highest levels to make sure that the Egyptian government understands that this is a priority.
My opening comments were designed to sort of provoke this conversation about whether our assumptions about the reasons for our aid are matched to current realities. And either one of you can take this question, but let me ask that question relative to Egypt. Is our aid necessary today in order to continue to prompt Egypt to achieve a détente with Israel, or is it now in their own security interest? Do they get something out of that relationship on its own, independent of our security assistance? Are they going to cut off our access to the canal if we withdraw a portion of our security assistance? Isn't there a case to be made that some of the things we used to purchase with aid to Egypt will do without that aid, or without the exact amount of aid that we provide today? Haven't circumstances changed since we began this $1.3 billion relationship in 1987?
I'll take the question first, give Das Resnick a break. So the bottom line for President Biden is that he values the relationship with Egypt. He believes they are an important security partner. He discussed in his phone call with President Sisi in May the U.S. intent for a constructive dialogue on human rights, but we also believe and support that Egypt has legitimate security concerns and believe that security assistance to Egypt is a critical tool in supporting those needs, whether it's border security, maritime security. We did see early in the administration when the Evergreen was stuck in the Suez, international maritime traffic, both commercial and military, was stuck. Egypt matters, both for Suez transit, for U.S. military overflight, cooperation with Egypt for Red Sea security, maritime security. The current view of the administration is that Egypt is playing a constructive role when it comes to border security, Libya, GERD, obviously the conflict in Gaza, et cetera. In terms of the FMF, it remains an important tool for us to work with Egypt in making sure that they have U.S. origin defense articles oriented towards what we assess to be shared security threats, whether it's counterterrorism, maritime security, border security. And I would note here that Egypt is interested in continuing this relationship with us. They recently agreed to upgrade their Apache helicopter fleet by using blended financing, not just U.S. security assistance, but also Egyptian national funds. This is an indicator that for us, and they believe this as well after extensive negotiations between the two governments, that they are interested in putting their resources to bear, not just U.S. forces, as they upgrade their U.S. defense articles.
And the question I'm simply asking is for us to assess the cost of altering our relationship versus the cost of continuing as it unmodified. The cost of continuing it unmodified is to send a signal of endorsement to this behavior. My question is, we should really get our heads wrapped around what the cost of altering the relationship is. My case is that there would not be a significant alteration because the things that you just laid out are in Egypt's security interest, separate and aside from the exact nature of our security relationship, but interested in continuing this dialogue. One last question before I turn to Senator Van Hollen, and that is on the issue of end-use monitoring. I know this is something the administration cares deeply about. We obviously had some disturbing revelations during the last 4 years about the way in which the UAE was transferring some of our equipment to Salafist-aligned militias in Yemen. Admittedly, it's difficult to track how every single weapon is going to be ultimately used. But are there ways in which we can have a tougher and stricter end-use monitoring program that allows us to have more visibility than we do today on the ways that our equipment and weapons are used? Is there a better way to do this?
Thanks for your question. We take the issues of end-use monitoring very, very seriously. We take all credible allegations of any authorized transfer or end uses of U.S. origin equipment very seriously. We investigate them consistent with applicable law. When there is a violation, we have several different options that we can pursue to address misuse or end-use concerns. We want to make sure that every transfer advances our foreign policy. The way that we look at each transfer, we're looking at history of misuse. We're looking at history of end-use abuse. So we do understand that these issues are complicated, but we are always looking to do better.
Great. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr.